Hi, I'm Alfred.
Hello, I'm Novitz.
Hi, I'm Moss.
And this is
The Morning Shift.
I have for you today is the story of a mother who frequently, I would say, perused the nightlife, the outside, and one day she didn't come back. And there's a couple of different internet theories about what happened to her or what happened to the people around her, but I'm here for the facts first. So, on Thursday, July 8th, 2004, Paiche Onyemaechi left her home, leaving behind her husband Chika and their two sons. She was seen around 5 p.m. that same day, shopping around, but then was never seen alive again. Unfortunately, we don't know much about the first 20 years of my victim, but here's what we do know. She came from a kind of large country in southeastern Africa called Malawi, which is ruled under a unitary presidential republic. So it's not too different from what we already know. In 1999, its chief justice was named Leonard Onyolo, and then he had one child, Paiche. She was a little girl with big dreams. Her father said her ambitions were larger than life, and she grew into an even more ambitious young woman. At 20 years old, she took just herself, packed up, and left Malawi to study business administration in London, England. And it's here that she met her husband, a charming Nigerian man named Chika Onyemaechi. Together, they applied for and were granted asylum just 1 year after they met, and they moved to Ireland, where they settled in Limerick when they first arrived. They couldn't quite get their footing in Limerick, so instead of suffering when they didn't have to, they packed up again and moved to a different part of Ireland, Waterford, in 2000.
Wait, so let
Mhm.
me get this straight. Let
Mhm.
me ask you this. She came
Mhm.
from South Africa.
Correct.
She was born there. And her husband came from Nigeria?
So
Was
she had two husbands, but the only thing we know about the first is that he was also Nigerian. She had a type. God forbid a girl have a type. With her first husband, she went to London. It's at this point she met her second husband, Chika, and that's when they moved to Ireland.
So we don't know anything about the
The
first.
father won't talk about him, and as you'll find out later, her husband can't. So, yeah. You're also, I'm leaving the dates out here because this all happened in the span of 2 years. 2000, she went to London by herself. She met and married her first husband in 2000, separated from him, met and married her second husband in 2001. By 2002, they were in Ireland.
got it. Okay. This paints a picture for me.
So, Waterford is where they ended up taking their roots and building their family. So, before I get into their disappearance, I think now is the perfect time to introduce the law enforcement system that's used in Ireland. So, there, the National Police Service is referred to as An Garda Síochána. A single guard is called a Garda, while multiple officers are called Gardaí. And by definition, An Garda Síochána means guardians of the peace. So they're largely unarmed, but they're very, very effective because of how present they are in their different communities. So you'll hear me say that people were taken or reported to Garda stations because this is where those officers were operating. So, in order to call in more powerful reinforcement with weapons, they have to wait for the weapons to arrive. No one patrols just with like firearms. July 10th, 2004. Paiche is reported missing by her husband at the Waterford Garda station. He reports that he'd last seen her when she left her home July 8th. When the Garda there asked him, "Why did you wait 2 days to report your wife being missing?" Chica reports that this wasn't the first time that Paiche had gone missing, but it was the first time that she'd not come back. Since they've moved to Ireland, at least 2 different times, Paiche had gone missing, 1, maybe 2 days, but she always ended up home, so he didn't worry about it.
Do we know when she went?
It is rumored, not confirmed, but it is rumored that Paiche was a sex worker. She worked at different dancing clubs, and the assumption there is that she was taking clients to and from different places as an escort during that time. This isn't anything new. He said she does this sometimes, but she always comes back. But now I'm worried. It's been 2 days and I haven't heard from her at all. Because at this point, it's morning of the 3rd day that he's reporting this to the Garda station.
So how long did she leave for?
1 to 2 days at most. But usually by the 2nd day, it's only happened twice. So last time, by the 2nd day, she came home.
Okay, gotcha.
The Garda immediately jumped into action. They increased their numbers in her neighborhood. They posted her photos everywhere. And that's when they found out that around 5 p.m. she'd been seen in Pickettstown. And that's not too unusual because Pickettstown's only about 5 miles or 7.5 kilometers away from Waterford. So, in the Garda's point of view, she's close. She's not home yet. And when they reported this information to Chica, he didn't indicate that anything was amiss with that information. So, they're still searching, but the guard presence decreases just a little. So maybe instead of 3 or 4 patrols, we're down to 2 or 3.
Somebody had reported they
Correct.
spotted her in that general area, and the police officers are like, "Hey, we found your wife in this area," or at least somebody did. And they just sort of stopped looking after that.
The general consensus is the search stopped being as intense. They never completely stopped looking, but the search stopped being as intense once they reported, "Hey, we saw her in Pickettstown. Do you know why she would be there?" And he was like, "Oh, okay, Pickettstown." And they're like, "Well, okay, Pickettstown." So no one's too concerned because at this point, they're still operating under, she disappears sometimes, but she'll come back. At this point, they have 2 sons. They're 2 or 3 years old. They're like, she'll come back. So no one's worried.
Right. Okay.
However,
Gotcha.
now 2 weeks are going. We're all the way at the end of July. It's July 23rd, and 20 miles away from Waterford, they find a mysterious black trash bag leaning up against a tree by a river.
Oh no.
2 women on their walk discover this bag, and something in them, I guess their inquisitive spirits, tells them to at least inspect the bag before they pass by it. And inside, they find the badly beaten and decapitated body of Paiche Onyemaechi, who at that point had been decomposing the entire time.
So, wait. So, they found her decapitated? Was her head in the bag?
And as a matter of fact, her head was never discovered.
Okay. So, to this day, we have no idea where her head is.
Which, of course,
That's
The
terrible.
guy were like, that's really strange. Because, okay, sure, some monster killed this innocent woman, but also some monster killed this innocent woman in a very brutal way. She was very badly bruised. And they took her head.
So they found her badly bruised. Could you really tell how fresh the bruising was?
The consensus, according to the Gardai, and they didn't go too deeply into it, the consensus is they believe that she had been dead for at least a week. And at that point, she still had skin to have bruises on.
That was my main concern.
And it seemed as though she were beat to death. There were no stabs or anything like
so
that.
that was the cause of death.
The head being removed was not what killed her. That was done after. So now the Gardai are in full force again. They sweep the neighborhood again, and of course, the first person that they interview is her husband. After his interview,
Of course.
he was released. About a week or so, 4 or 5 days after his interview, their family home was searched, and all of the people that she knew in life were interviewed. But the Gardai was getting nowhere. Ireland sorely hosted her funeral on the 30th of July at St. Otteran's Cemetery.
It took them a week after his interview
to even
to
search the home.
house?
Correct.
Why wouldn't they search it ahead of time, considering they know that she's dead already and her head is missing?
It
Doesn't make
doesn't,
sense.
and no
Yeah,
one
exactly.
ever asked that question. Not even her father, who you remember is also in law enforcement. It's a little shaky, but you'll notice also that I said that Ireland, the country itself, is who hosted her funeral.
Yeah, I was thinking that. Why not the husband?
After he was
Right.
released, on the 23rd, he disappeared. He was last spotted on July 27th. He disappeared. He left. He didn't take anything. He's just gone. But there were no clothes missing. The house was in a state, but they attributed that state to him having to care for his sons full time by himself for the first time, and they were only about 2 or 3 years old. So it didn't look like
Right, so he disappeared, but where were the children?
still at the home. Like he disappeared.
Alone.
Correct.
Okay,
Wow.
I'm with it.
The
Okay.
children were home by
She's
themselves
gone.
when the
It's
Garda
gone.
searched the home. That's honestly, it's my assumption that they contacted him post-interview to ask if they could search his home. They didn't get an answer, and that's why they ended up going anyway.
So how long had he been missing at this point up until
About
the
a
search?
few days. They said about 5 days after his initial interview is when they searched the home, and they discovered that he hadn't been seen since the 27th when they searched the home.
So his children were home alone for 2
by
days.
themselves.
Okay, nobody was watching them at all. There was nobody else in the
Nobody
home,
else.
no grandparents.
All
no
of their
neighbor.
family still lived in Malawi. So it was just it's once again, it's not explicitly stated, but I believe that their neighbors are the ones who said, "Oh yeah, the last time we saw him was the 27th," because there was no one at home. The house was a wreck, but like not a break-in wreck, but just generally messy. So they were there by themselves. At this current point in time, still in 2025, they are concerned about him because of the way that he left. The way that he disappeared was very alarming for them, especially considering that's the exact same way it happened to Paiche.
How is it similar?
But we couldn't ask him either. So it's the assumption that they're operating under is one person leaves home, never comes back. Her husband, worried sick about her, leaves home, never comes back. His wallet wasn't at home. So the things that, oh yeah, what's in my pockets, I'm good to go, none of that was at home. No house keys, no wallet, no ID. But also, no flights, no money spent on any debit cards, Nothing. No withdrawals from a bank account. He's just gone.
Okay.
Vanished.
Exactly.
Thin air.
So
That's what it sounds
the
like.
guard eye, they're very, very interested in talking to him. But at this point, they're worried for him as well. Paiche's service was attended by her remaining family members. So her brother, father, and sister-in-law flew in from Malawi. And it was at this point that her 2 sons were placed in her father's custody. And then over 100 other people from Waterford, including the African and Nigerian communities, also attended her funeral. And her brother, Leon, spoke highly of his sister, mentioning how lovely she was and how great she was to talk to and how great of a friend she was. After this funeral, it's as if there was fresh fire under the guard eye, and they followed multiple leads for her disappearance and eventual death. None of them actually ended up coming to fruition, though. So it's at this point where us armchair detectives kind of spring into action, because there are several prominent theories, including her husband, as the reason for her undoing. So when the guard eye searched their home, I told you, the house was kind of a mess. It was, a little messy between the father taking care of his children for the first time and then the children being left alone. The house ended up in disarray. But also, they found areas of carpet that were ripped up. So there's areas in this house where there's carpet missing. And of course, they can't ask the 2 and 3-year-olds what happened. So they filed this away. Okay. More stuff to investigate. Gotcha. It's at this point when they do their second round of investigation that they find out that Paiche used to work at strip clubs. This is another theory that is actually very heavily explored, specifically in Ireland. According to the Sex Workers Alliance of Ireland, who call themselves SWI, the guard eye didn't do as much as they could have during the investigation, because when Paiche and Chica first came to Ireland, they did live in Limerick, and it's there that Paiche began working at a strip club. Her work transformed, and that's where she ended up being a sex worker. When she first moved to Ireland, she was just a dancer. But one thing led to another, and she ended up being a sex worker. And they believe that her status as a sex worker directly contributed to the lack of justice that was sought during her investigation. And it was at this point that the Sex Workers Alliance of Ireland actually came up with their own flyer. And on this flyer, it's mentioned that Paiche also may have gone by the names Gina or Cassandra Willis. So,
Okay. Well, I mean, that's not unusual for a sex worker,
Right.
typically.
but they're sort of upset because it took them coming out with that information for it to be known. Because maybe someone had seen Paiche within those 2 weeks between her going missing and her ending up dead. But they didn't know because of her name. So it's their, I'd say their 2 cents, but it's their 2 cents that a little more could have been done by the guard eye station.
That's fair.
Another lesser thought of theory, of course, the main theory is of course the husband. The theory of the husband is heavily rooted in stereotype.
What do you mean by that?
When it comes to
It's like the husband always did it.
mixed with the fact that he's Nigerian, the
Racism
theory is that
always comes back
the
to
sex work at some point he didn't like it anymore, or he just came to the conclusion that that was unfitting for a wife of his, and he just killed her for it. And then once he was about to get caught, he went missing. That's his theory. There's not a lot on his theory. The only sources of that theory were untrustworthy at best.
Mhm.
So, did we ever find him?
20 years, he is still missing.
So, okay, what about them checking these strip clubs? Did they actually go there, talk to club owners, talk to other dancers, or other sex
To the
workers?
Sex Workers Alliance of Ireland, there was little to no police presence in strip clubs for Paiche. And that's a source of their ire because they believe that if they looked at her place of employment first, especially with at least one person saying she did escort work, that would have been sort of a nail on the head for the guard eye. It doesn't appear as though it was investigated as thoroughly as it could have been.
Okay.
And then there's one final theory as to what actually happened to the husband instead of Paiche. You'll remember, Paiche's father was the justice of Malawi. The theory is that Paiche's father didn't like the course of Paiche's life. And especially with his daughter his only daughter ending up going missing and then ending up dead, the theory is that he then made Chica go missing. This theory is actually more rooted in what isn't said than what is. So outwardly, there's no malice, there's no upset. He's being the perfect grieving father. But the internet, everyone's saying he has the money, he has the power, his daughter's gone missing. There's pieces of carpet missing in the home, and then now his grandsons have been left alone. But they were found 2 days later. So the theory is that with such a influential father, how does Paiche go missing without any more information than what I just gave you being available? Nothing but she was a great kid with big ambitions. She moved to London, and within 2 years of moving to London, she moves to a totally different country, and within 4 years of leaving Malawi, she's dead. So the theory is that her father was like, oh no, this won't do. And the father took out his anger or took out his grief on Paiche's husband, and that's why he can't be found. And I believe this theory is why the Gardai are more concerned about him rather than treating him as a runaway murderer. In 2024, July of 2024, the Gardai reopened her case. So 20 whole years, straight 2 decades after she gone missing, they reopened her case, and a fresh appeal is being made for anyone who knows anything about Paiche or anything about Gina Willis or Cassandra Willis, who may or may not have been a sex worker in 2004. At this point also, if they know anything about her husband, Chica. So if anyone knows anything, or if they've seen anything, heard anything, any information at all about any of those 4 names, they would like any interested party. It can be an anonymous tip, or you can name yourself. They'd like them to reach out to the Traymore Garda Station or any Garda Station in the area. And if you wish to remain anonymous, there's also a Garda confidential line that we can drop in the show notes. But that's, as of right now, that's all we have. There's been no new evidence uncovered since July of last year. They're re-examining old evidence, but obviously it's been 20 years. They can't look at the home anymore, or that area. It's sort of a memorial now, unofficially. Some neighbors planted flowers. There's a bench there, but it was nothing done by the city itself. So it's a little harder now than it was then. But that's where her story ends. Her father has her children, and they're back in Malawi.
Okay, so they moved in with their grandpa, which does make sense. That's so sad. That's all the information that we have.
That's it from every source. I followed the Irish Times, which is their official newspaper. She was in the newspaper for weeks when she disappeared. When they reopened the case, she was in the news again for about 3 or 4 days. Not a lot has been found about her, which the Sex Workers Alliance of Ireland says didn't have to be the case. And they wholeheartedly believe that she wasn't investigated as thoroughly as she should have been because of her status as a sex worker.
Okay. We should put information about their own investigation also in the show notes, maybe their
Yes.
website, so people can look into them as well and get to know.
They were
their
actually in
information.
the Waterford News, which is the localized newspaper. But yes, they reached out to the Gardaí as well. Of course, the Gardaí didn't exactly have a statement for them, but they're also investigating her disappearance.
Thank you so much for sharing this story today. Appreciate you.
And this has been
The Mourning Shift.